went to a kind of less competitive league. So he could play competitive football, but without the massive impact on his joints, and then return to Europe without his career being impacted too much. I think if that's the case, that is absolute genius. And I think it has saved his career in the way that he can extend it for a few years. You could realistically see him playing for another 1-2 seasons, I think.
Oh, I think that definitely Sweden could do with him over the next national tournament. Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. They're quite an unexciting team. They don't have that focal point. I think just what he does, like I said earlier, what he did to the AC Milan dressing room when he arrived, he could undoubtedly do that to the Sweden dressing room. The guy is, as he said, not a king, he's a god, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. And then he's got, well, I mean, I do this face because he used to play for Inter Milan. Then he went to Barcelona to win the Champions League, but Inter Milan won. Then he came back to AC Milan, and the fans, the Nerazzurri fans, absolutely hated him. And so, well, now I don't like him that much as a person, but as a player, man, the Ibrahimovic highlight reel on YouTube will always be a go-to when you want to watch brilliant goals. And it's beautiful to see that he's still performing. I mean, it's a treat it's eye candy, as the Americans would say, right?
Definitely.
And beautiful to see. And
I think I'm going to disagree with you on the person thing. I know he rubs a lot of people up the wrong way because he's obviously arrogant as fuck. But having read his autobiography, listeners, if you've not read it, I highly recommend it. He doesn't give a fuck who he upsets. It's a fantastic, interesting read, really interesting read. He's a very interesting guy, very driven. I think as a person, I find him highly entertaining as well. So, but I can understand how you might be pissed off that he joins your bitter rivals.
And I don't want to get into Ballon d'Or discussions because then we would have to bring in Thierry Henry and many more players who've never won that trophy. But I think there is an argument for FIFA to award Ibrahimovic something. Just create a new trophy the day he retires.
Do they have a Lifetime Achievement Award? I don't know. Maybe
they might have, but he definitely deserves it. But talking about other immortal players, Rory has pinpointed two among the many that we could think of. And these two are two, honestly, brilliant stories about an English player and a Japanese player. The latter one, you guys might know something more about.
So we're going to start with when Tommy suggested this topic, he said ageless players. And if you're English and you've watched football to any level or you know anything about football, when you hear about old players, the first name that comes to mind is Sir Stanley Matthews. Okay, so he was born in Stoke, which is quite close or very close to my hometown Crewe and bitter rivals of the mighty Crewe Alexandra FC. But he was born in 1915 and he retired, you ready?
I'm ready.
1965.
Which makes it very difficult math. 50 years old?
50 years old when he retired. So he made his debut for Stoke in around the late 30s, okay? As a teenager, they knew he was so good that they were paying him a full wage of £5 a week before he made a first-team appearance. Basically, this guy revolutionized his position in football. He was, at the time, what is known as an outside right. Now we will call it a right winger. And he revolutionized his position by, at the time, the trend was often to wait for the defender to make their move before the attacker kind of tried to get round them. And what he would often do is preempt the defender, and his trademark trick was to drop the shoulder to the right and then cut in on the left. And this was a trick that at the time, you know, in the 30s was quite revolutionary, and he excited fans. People loved him instantly. He became a Stoke City legend. He made, in his career, the two clubs that he's most famous or most connected with are Stoke City and Blackpool. Combined, he made around 710 appearances for them. He scored around 50 goals, and he is a player who, he was so good, he had an FA Cup final named after him. It is called the Stanley Matthews Final. So, growing up in Stoke, his dad died when he was quite young, and he made two promises to his dad, that he would become a professional footballer and that he would win the FA Cup. Now, the first 2 FA Cups he played in, he unfortunately lost. He found himself in the 3rd FA Cup final, 3-1 down, with about 20 minutes to go, and he apparently turned the game on its head. The striker, Stan Mortensen, who was his best friend and partner, got a hat-trick all set up by Sir Stanley, and he finally lifted the FA Cup that he'd been chasing for his career in 1953. He finally won it after losing in 48 and 51. So this is his club career. And then in England,
I know what's coming. I feel like I know what's coming. There's one big piece missing, right?
Yeah, so with England, he had 54 caps and scored 11 goals. His England career didn't get off to a great start. He had his first cap and then was left out of the team for a while because he didn't impress. Then his first game back was quite an infamous game where England had to play Germany in Germany. But this was at a time when Adolf Hitler was in charge. And it's a game now that in England is quite infamous, as the English team were told to perform the Nazi salute before the game as part of the appeasement. Now, obviously, this is not a judgment on the players. This is not a judgment on anyone. It's just an interesting note in football history. But England were 3-0 down, and they went on to win the game 6-3, again inspired by Sir Stanley, in Germany, in Berlin, in front of old Adolf himself. So his England career was highly decorated. He then, at the end of his career, returns to Stoke in the 2nd division at the time, gets them promoted, and despite being in the 2nd division, wins Footballer of the Year, becoming the oldest person to do so at 48 before retiring at 50 years and 6 days. This guy there's statues of him in Stoke, or a statue of him in Stoke. He is a god in that city, and I think he is one of the first icons of English football, and he's the first person who came to my mind when I thought of ageless footballers.
Also, 1956 Ballon d'Or winner, right?
Yes, exactly. I think one of the few English players to win it. Him, Kevin Keegan.
Gary Lineker,
yeah, correct.
Never forget.
I just wanted to pay homage to Sir Stanley, and you have to bear in mind that 6 years of his career were interrupted by a world war, right? He became corporal in the RAF. Like, this guy had an incredible life, and I'm glad we got to speak about him for a little bit.
I love these throwback stories when the war was involved. I recently dusted off an old vinyl recorded by my grandfather with all his commentaries from the 1960s. We're going to have a special about my grandpa, who was a football journalist. But I love when you look up a player. So when Rory told me about this player, I had pretty much zero knowledge about him. I looked up the pictures. I love seeing the old kits, the black and white pictures, those big, thick leather balls. It brings back a lot of footballing romance.
I think when you look at modern football and then you go back and look at that, it's very easy to get very romantic about it. And I do.
And before we move on to other more known players who mainly played in Serie A, which has the reputation of being a pretty old league, there is a Japanese man that we need to talk about, right?
So he did get a shout out in one of our previous episodes, but I underestimated how old he is. And his name is, he's known as King Kazu. His name is Kazuyoshi Miura. I hope I said that right. And he's had a bit of a journeyman career, an interesting career. He's weirdly from Japan, but started his career in Brazil. Played for Santos, Palmeiras. He did a year in Genoa in 94-95. He then moved to Australia. He's played for Japan 89 times, got 55 goals. He never appeared in a World Cup. He was quite unlucky. He fired Japan to the 98 World Cup with 14 goals, but was then left out of the squad, which I think is incredibly harsh, right? You score 14 goals in qualifying and don't get to play. But anyway, he is now still currently playing. He was born in 1967.
Wow, he's my uncle's age and he's still playing football.
So he was born 2 years after Stanley Matthews retired.
Oh my God!
Right?
Well, like passing on how do you say when there is a run?
Passing the baton. Passing the baton.
Exactly.
And he did take the record from Sir Stanley Matthews of being the oldest professional player. The record was 50 years and 6 days, as we said, and now King Kazu holds it at 53 years. He has now played in J1, which is the top division of Japan, at 53.
You know what's going to happen. You already know what's going to happen. Ibrahimovic is going to somehow find our podcast, listen to these stats, and note down the current record and be like, all right, do I have to make it 53 years old? Next mission. Let's do it.
Take that Michael Jordan. At that point, I took it personally.
Exactly. About absolutely anything. Oh, that really fueled me to do better. That really fueled me to end my career at 65 years of age.
So those are the two players that came to mind when we were talking about ageless footballers. Just can you imagine? Mid-50s, you should be having a midlife crisis, not playing. You should be buying a red sports car somewhere.
Exactly. He's probably got nephews and nieces around and stuff like that. Or maybe he's about to, because, at 50 years of age, there is a whole lot that can happen. But yeah, these are I really enjoyed hearing Rory speak about these two players because they're kind of the more unknown ones of the ones that we're going to talk about. Because the other three that came to our mind, among many, were three huge and recent examples of ageless players who kept delivering until their very last game. We are talking, of course, about Paolo Maldini, centre-back for AC Milan, Javier Zanetti, right-back, left-back, midfielder for Inter Milan, and Francesco Totti, the captain. Doesn't even need an introduction of any sort.
No, I love this section that we've been able to talk about Ibra and Totti.
Yeah,
honestly, doing the research for Totti was just reminding myself of honestly why I fell in love with Italian football. As I've said before, Roma were the first team where I was like, okay, I can get behind this, and Totti was the reason why that happened. The scooped goals, the elegance. Tommy, tell us about Totti.
Of course, his best goal, in my opinion, he's ever scored was against Inter Milan. A beautiful lob from way outside the box. He didn't have any right to shoot it from there. But that is the play that, in my opinion, epitomizes really this player. And he's only ever played for Roma. He retired when he was 40 years old. I remember this beautiful Roma derby against Lazio, of course, where he scored a brace, and then he went on to celebrate with the famous
selfie,
with the selfie in front of the curva. And it was one of those players that when he retired, it was very sad for everybody. It was the end of an era. Like, if you collected Panini stickers, you knew that Totti wouldn't be, for the first time since you were born, he wouldn't be in the next collection. And all of Italian football paused for a moment when he retired because of the guy he was, the fact that he has won a Scudetto with Rome, and he's never ever listened to the rumors that wanted him at Real Madrid or Manchester United. He always stuck to the Giallorossi.
Well, I remember, obviously, his career was so incredible, but towards the end, Spalletti had the impossible job of trying to take Totti out of the team for the good of the team, right? But fans all around Italy wanted to see Totti for one last time, to the point where Milan fans unfurled a banner. Now, again, my pronunciation might be terrible, that said, La Sorprende omaggio al rivale Francesco Totti, which is, we want to give an homage to our rival Francesco. These fans, the whole country loved Francesco Totti, and they were all sad when he retired. If you're hungover and you want to get emotional, as I have done a few times, watch the video of Francesco Totti saying bye to the Stadio Olimpico. It's about 20 minutes long, but my God, it is powerful. It is powerful.
It is, because in a way, Totti also became the symbol of Italy. Let's not forget, he's also won a World Cup, but he became like, I don't know, especially in the early 2000s when he had the long hair with the headband, he was like the good-looking Italian guy and kind of ignorant, kind of naive.